Hello and welcome to a new episode of the Leadership in Construction podcast. Today I have a real treat. I am joined by Natalie Schrogl, who is putting the human element back into leadership. So we're going to talk today about the human side of leadership. So Natalie, welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much for having me, Michael. As Michael said, my name is Natalie Schrogl and I come from Germany. I am the founder of the company, The Interface Leadership. And what we basically do is we help leaders put the human at the forefront and then build all the strategies around that. So basically, that's what we do. We unlock the human element in leadership.
That's brilliant. And so really this is all about putting the people at the center of the organization, at the center of leadership. So we're gonna get into a whole lot of detail around that, I'm sure. But what I want to do is just sort of start off by getting to know you a bit more and getting to understand your background and how it is you came to develop a career in terms of leadership. So do you want to give us just a bit of a background behind yourself?
Yeah, sure. I'm originally from Kenya, actually. So I've been in Germany for the past, 14 years. And so been in the banking and finance sector for all this time. And, one thing, as a Black person from Africa living in Germany, there was always that element of, regardless where I went, regardless where I worked, there was always this element of diversity that came into the picture. And then I realized that in the companies or the teams where I felt most comfortable, it was where people just looked at me as a person I was and the competence that I brought to the table, and not who is she, where does she come from, blah, 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 blah. So there was really no focus on my diversity or my heritage. It was just really focusing on me and the competence that I brought to the table. So,
As it should be.
As it should be, focusing on the person. And then I realized that the more I grew in my career and then, got into leadership and started leading teams and diverse teams, the more successful I got, or most of my success came from the fact that I really focused on my team. Mm-hmm. I created those ecosystems. I created spaces where people could thrive. I created spaces where people could really bring me their best. They could funnel me their best ideas. And then everything has literally worked, The happier the people are, the more focused they are on the work, the more productive they are, and the more success we get as a leader. So, and that is why it was just quite simple to focus on that human element and put it in a framework that can be scaled on different occasions. So basically, that is why we focus on that human element of leadership.
That's brilliant. And, I think my story is sort of very similar in that when I became professionally qualified, I realized the technical competencies that got me to where I was in that stage of my career were no longer fit for moving forward, but no longer fit also for leading teams of people. And that's where I need to go the technical business side and really focus on. And what I learned about leadership at this time in my career was it isn't about my progression anymore or what I can do technically. It's all about what other people can do and giving them the space, as you talk about the environment, the ecosystems, in order for them to be able to thrive and succeed, whatever success they believe is what success is to them. So, my story completely resonates with exactly what you're saying. I think that's brilliant. So how did you go from that financing background into starting a career and developing a business in which, I guess, teaches and coaches and consults others on leadership?
Mhm. So I still work in a corporate setting, by the way, and I'm
Okay.
still in banking and finance. And it's just basically, when you've worked in corporate for such a long time, and when my daughter was born, I took 1 year leave, right? And
Hmm.
that was the first time that I literally had enough time to just really reflect and think about, okay, what do I want to do? And looking for that purpose and understanding that, you know, with the birth of a baby, sometimes you get this aha moment, right? I mean, you're a father yourself,
Hmm.
and you
Hmm.
know that sometimes these little ones, they do have a way of really teaching us or pushing us to look for that purpose in life, right? And 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 for me, it was really that moment where I realized I wanted to focus on leadership. And I wanted to focus on leadership in a way that mattered, in a way that really was impactful.
Hmm.
Because when you do the right things in leadership, everything else, the KPIs and the success and everything that you're looking for, it just falls into place. And that's how the interface came about.
Fantastic.
I
I
took,
mean, yeah. Sorry, what were you going to say? You're going to
no,
continue then.
go ahead, go ahead.
So, I mean, this is the thing that I'm sure you'll find as well. Convincing others that
Mm-hmm.
if you focus on the people first, I mean, we've said this in this podcast before. If you care about people first and care about their interests and their values before you worry about deadlines and programs and
Mm-hmm.
budgets and blah blah blah, blah all those KPIs, matrices, which are completely artificial, that were completely invented ourselves. Um, those aspects of a project or whatever sort
Mm-hmm.
of matrix you make up in your organization, they look after themselves. People that feel supported, psychologically and physically safe, that can thrive in your business or in your organization or in your team, can look after the other important matrix
Mm-hmm.
that like deadlines and things like that. So
Absolutely.
yeah.
Absolutely. And if you look at it today, I mean, if you look at leadership today, I do feel like leadership has reached a critical tipping point
Mm-hmm.
because of the very complex context in which a lot of organizations find themselves in, right? So it really doesn't matter if you're a large corporate or if you are an SME or a solopreneur, it really doesn't matter. It is that dynamic setting of the context, it demands a change or a shift in a lot of traditional leadership practices.
Mm-hmm.
And if you look at all these quite successful companies, look at companies in Silicon Valley, they realized early that a working or a thriving environment is where people are given the space to, self-organize, to make decisions, to actually fail, a culture where people can really bring their authentic self to work. And you can see they are focused on driving the best ideas and the very best for the organization, which gives the organizations a huge competitive advantage in the market, right?
Absolutely.
And that is where people-centric leadership comes in. It is that element that is needed to help traditional leadership to shift, to make that shift from traditional thinking to the new way of leading the new workforce and to lead the new world in this era of knowledge and the era where everything is quite digital and the world got so small and teams are very diverse. And today you can work with people from all over the world in quite simply, right?
No, absolutely. There's two things I want to sort of pick up from that.
Mm-hmm.
First one's quite a simple one because you mentioned in there the giving people space to fail. And certainly
Mm-hmm.
when I was starting to become a leader, that's what I was petrified of. It's like, if I relinquish control to people, what if they fail? What's going to happen? And then it took me a long time to sort of realize that's meant to happen. People are meant to
Mm-hmm.
fail. And if we want to be innovative and if we want to push those boundaries and move outside our comfort zone, we're going
Mm-hmm.
to have some failures along the way. Um, so, to expand on that, and leaders often talk about creating that environment, creating that space in order to allow people to feel like they're supported when they fail. Other practical things that you implement that help create that space, that environment in which people feel psychologically safe to fail, to try new things, to stretch outside their comfort zone without fear of being judged.
It always starts with the leader. It really always starts with the leader, because you have to be in a position to be able to create that space for the people. So I normally work with a framework. We work with a framework. We call it the Arm of Leadership. It's a model that I developed, and it is underpinned by 6 principles. So the first principle is authenticity. And in authenticity, we dive deep into finding the positioning of the particular leader in place, right? So this is where he really goes on to find his leadership anchor. How can I lead authentically, but still effectively? Because leading authentically doesn't mean that you are holding hands and singing kumbaya, right?
Yeah.
Exactly. So, and then the second principle is resilience. So we're teaching you resilience. How do you react to disruption? How do you react positively to that? How do you take challenges and create opportunity out of that? Because when the leader understands what resilience is, and he knows where he is in his resilience journey, he's able to lead his team effectively. He knows when they make mistakes, when things are not going as we expect them to go, he has a kind of a framework that he can roll out to his team, right? And then we also talk about mastery, mastery of the mindset. That is the biggest factor that is important in today's world when you talk about shifting an old or a traditional paradigm of leadership to the new paradigm of leadership, right? So when you talk about the mindset, it's about depth, it's about focus. What mindset do you need to have as a leader so that you are able to understand they are going to make mistakes? If my team is not making mistakes, it means they're not giving me their best. I'm not pushing them hard enough.
Yeah, quite.
That is quite an indicator to know how much you're getting from your team. Because if everybody's playing it safe, then something is wrong.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
We move to ownership. The fourth principle is ownership. Ownership, this is built on the fundamental principle that every single person in a team is accountable for the results, for the end results, regardless of if they are directly affected by a process or whatever it is that is happening within the team. So when you're able to build this culture of ownership, it also pays into that's what you're trying to build as a leader. And then we talk about the fifth principle, that is understand. We talk about different forms of communication, because you need to be able to build the right communication culture that is going to make it easy for people to actually touch on quite difficult conversations, difficult topics, without really, without being hard on the topic, but soft on the person.
Yeah. More that there is a problem than you are the problem.
Exactly. Separating the topic from the person. Exactly. Learning how to communicate right. And also, when you talk about communication, we also dive deeper into the art of listening, because a lot of leaders just don't listen. That is one experience. That is one thing that I've really, it shocks me all the time, because we are not taught to listen as leaders. And if we can only listen, you will get all the insight you need to lead your people right. But anyway, that's a story of another day. And then the last element is R, and that is respect. And that is what ties the ribbon around everything. It's about respecting people for who they are, regardless of where they come from, regardless of who they are, and where they are in their journeys. And so when we're able to really respect the difference that we all bring into the spaces that we occupy, you find that it really doesn't matter the diversity that people bring.
Yeah.
You're able to play as a team. So those are the 6 principles that we work with. And yeah.
No, that's brilliant. So just very quickly, what were those 6 principles from top to bottom?
Authenticity,
yeah,
resilience, mastery of the mindset, ownership, understand. And when we talk about understand, we're talking about understanding to communicate, right? Building the right communication cultures, and respect.
That's brilliant. And what I was listening to that, a lot of that was about the leader going first, the leader giving first. So something I talked about yesterday was about trust, a lot around about trust. And some people say you've got to earn my trust. And actually, I think it's more that your trust is yours to lose, so I give you my trust. And as long as if you can give trust, if you can give all those other things like understanding, resilience, and authenticity, and what was the sixth one again? The sixth one was
respect. Ownership.
That's probably the most important. Yeah, if you can give respect, then it comes back to you tenfold. But you need to be the one that instigates that and goes first in terms of giving that, I think. Is that what you think?
Yeah, absolutely. And and then you also have to think about it. I like to think about it as a triangle, right? So when you're going out to your team, you need, first of all, to empower your team, right? So empowerment, you can define it differently depending on who you got in your team and what is it that you're really trying to achieve, right? And everything you do, it always has to be in alignment with the objectives of the organization's objectives of the team and the values as well. The leaders' values, the values of the organizations, they always have to be in alignment, right? So it's all about how do we empower our people so that they can work from their areas of strength, from their places of strength. And then once they've been empowered, then you want to create that ecosystem. You want to create that space where they feel safe enough to do what it is that they are good at. And then once you've kind of taken care of those 2 points, then you can move to leverage. Then you actually, as a leader, you have the right to leverage people's intellects, right? You got them the right to leverage their skills. You got the right to really dig deep and get the best from your team. So I kind of like to think about it as a triangle. So you want to talk about empowerment, train, give them the resources, and then give them the space, and then get the best out of your people.
That's what I like. I listen to what you hear. I think that's brilliant. The bit I like most is the space bit. Is again, for me, it's about the space, the autonomy, and the trust. It's absolutely no good as a leader if you micromanage, if you overshadow them all the time to kind of understand, to watch what's going on, how they're doing it, and then inputting, don't do it like this, do it like this sort of thing. The micromanagement, it just speaks volumes to the person that you're leading, that you don't trust them to fulfill their job. And what happens, and this could be employer to employee, it could be client to consultant, client to contractor, for example. It means that it's not really ownership, which you mentioned, of their work. It's the leader's work, or it's the client's work, only with your name on it, and you feel no ownership over that. And I'm sure you may have had this experience, but I certainly have, that when you don't take ownership of something, you don't have vested inspiration into it or passion invested into it. So your willingness to turn up each day to pursue that is you don't have it. It's not there. So I think I'm hearing what you're saying. That I don't want to put words into your mouth, but I think what you're saying is, empowering people, giving them the space in order to make decisions for their own, work independently, and feel like they have trust and understanding that they can do that. And that then really helps to inspire and to motivate them into to bringing their absolute best work. Is that
absolutely? And to empowerment, what I would also add there is also train the people, give them the resources they need. So because most of the time you find that a lot of leaders, we expect things that we haven't defined, or we expect things that we haven't trained our people for.
Okay.
So train, give the resources.
So to talk about training then, okay, because there's probably 2 aspects to training. There's the typical classroom training, and there's the experience way of doing things. But give you, for instance, kind of scenario, if you had someone that wanted to do training because they'd realized that actually my passion is somewhere else. It's not in this current role. It's kind of somewhere else. It's along the same lines as this current role. So, for example, if you in construction, if you're if you worked in the ground and you were a plant operator, for example, but you wanted to really be a project manager or go down that route, and you wanted to do that training, do you feel it's important as a leader to not only give them the training that they need, but also the training that they want, realizing that right where they are right now in their career isn't where they want to be for the whole life, and it might be something completely different, or it might be something that's a little bit not quite in your discipline, but it's looking after that individual. What do you think to that?
Well, the thing is, they're gonna leave you anyway. If somebody feels like they're not being effective where they are at the moment, or whatever work they do within your organization, that it's not really playing into the bigger picture of where they want to take their lives or what their life's purpose is, they are going to leave you anyway.
Yeah.
So and then we go back to when, as a leader, when you get it right, when you have created that space where people can really be honest with you, when you have a wonderful communication culture where they can openly come to you and go like, you know what, Michael, my goal is to actually start a baking business. I don't want to be in the construction business, right? And then it's up to you as a leader to think about, okay, when do you want to start your baking business, right? How can the work that you do here today pay into that goal that you're trying to achieve? And if you cannot answer that question, then you let them go. Because at the end of the day, they are unhappy, you are unhappy, and the business is losing.
Yeah.
So there's the thing of providing the training that people need and the training that they want. It's basically, what can you be able to give? What can you provide as a leader or as an organization? How can you be able to provide that what your employees need and want? How do you bring that in balance?
That's a tough one, isn't it?
But to be able to answer that is what does the communication culture look like? What relationship have you built with your team and the people that you serve?
And I suppose what value can an organization give one person or a team that will continue to help them towards what they believe, what they've realized is their purpose? Because I don't think it's uncommon that people will start a career or start within an organization, realize, actually, this isn't quite what I thought it was going to be, and my desires have slightly changed. And I do think if you don't have those communication connections like you talked about, and people don't speak openly about that, then that's going to create those sort of toxic work environments that we don't need in work. So in the construction sector, it's probably slightly different from finance in that we on site and in use also, but mostly in site, we have to really look after the safety, the health and safety. And if we can't be open enough and have those conversations, then we're not going to have those conversations about health and safety, or we're not going to speak up if we think something's done quite, unsafely. So it's in construction, that's huge. That's really huge, in making sure that we have that.
And you see, this is something that I see a lot in, especially in large corporates, right? Corporates, they have quite rigid structures, right? It's always, if you want to achieve a particular position, you got to work through, take this step and take this step and take the next step, right? And then sometimes it does feel like that ladder hits a dead end, right? And then you can either move sideways, but you can't go higher, or those ladders, they get to a point where they don't really think about the employee or the leader themselves, right? They change their bedürfnisse in German. Their needs change. As you grow as a leader or as an employee, your needs change as well, or your family setting, whatever it is, things change, right? And then whatever roles that are being offered within the organization, they don't really define that what you want to do. And that what you want to do could actually benefit the organization, right? And then you find that there's a disconnect there, and then most of the employees, they leave because the organizations, they don't have the courage to either create these new roles, or they just don't want to get into it, or they just don't want the complication, right? So
Yeah.
you end up losing employees that have served the organization for over a decade. And you don't only lose an employee, you lose skills, you lose knowledge, you lose experience. God. Anyway.
Yeah.
Do you understand what I'm trying to get to?
Yeah. And this is all about putting those people at the center of the leadership of the team, and external elements, come sort of secondary. And yeah, I think you're right. I think communication is the biggest part of that. Making sure that you can, it's just being open with one another about your values, what you're trying to achieve as a team. So what about, so we talk about that. What about having that vision, having those passions? What if you sort of feel like, I don't really have, not so much values, but I don't really have a goal or a passion about where I want to go with my life or with my career? What about addressing that?
Are you asking from a leader's perspective or from the team's perspective?
So say from like a team's perspective. So if you're in the leader's position and they sort of just feel slightly uninspired and not quite sure about really what they want to do with their lives, not sure what they do with their career. How can you address that as a leader?
Oh, that's quite easy. That's really quite easy. This is what I normally go back to. I normally advise leaders to go back to the drawing board. Why did you start working? Why did you start working in the first place? Right? There had to be a reason why they started. And once that is defined, what have you achieved until now? Where do you want to go? Or when did you stop dreaming? What happened? Because there's usually a shift. Something happens that the employee either feels, okay, I'm not really quite sure what I'm doing or where I want to go. Something happens. There has to be something that happened, right? Either in the private setting or in a professional setting. And just really finding that out and trying to be there for them and as they walk through this journey or as they try to find their purpose.
And being that sort of emotionally strong, that if that turns out not to be with this organization anymore or in this team anymore, that you have that ability to be able to support and help, get there. Because I honestly do believe that leadership goes far beyond what any team or organization or any project is doing at that very point in time. I often try and say to people that what you want to do as your career and what we do as a team is going to outlive any organization or any project. So we have to focus on that and protect that and value that. We've got to decide what's value to us and what we're passionate about and what we want to change. And as you said about having the anchor, protect that and keep that as our core values about moving forward. And if you're not sure what your team's values are or what you stand for, that's a good place to start, isn't it? Right from the start. It's like, why did you get, from my perspective, it'd be, why would you get into engineering? So when I was a child, I always thought I wanted to be an inventor that would invent something to save the world. Not that the world's like in imminent danger from one particular thing. But as a civil engineer, I sort of think, that's what civil engineers do. And I certainly lost my way and sort of got into this profit chasing, budget orientated and program orientated person. And it wasn't until I realized that that mindset damaged relationships with people and didn't actually spell success for any project, that I realized this is where leadership, as we call it, but just being human with other humans is key to developing teams that work really well with one another and can actually really make a difference, can do that. So I found that getting in touch with, why did I get into construction? Why did I get into civil engineering in the first place? Helps me to guide me where I want to go now.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So I think that's really, really important. And
absolutely.
If you can't be open with employees or people that you lead or people within your team, and they can't be open with you, there's no chance you're going to be able to have that conversation.
Absolutely. And to kind of speak into that anchor as well, it always starts with a leader. It always, your team is only as good as you are, because you're kind of that glue that puts everything together. You are the person on that bird's eye view who sees the pieces and the bits that the team doesn't see, and you kind of hold it together. So speaking into that anchor, as a leader, you must know what your leadership anchor is. And how do you find that? It is that point where how you want to lead and how you can lead intersect. What do I mean by that? How you want to lead based on your values, based on your experience, based on what you've studied for, based on your competence and all that, and how you can lead, because you might want to do a lot of impactful things, but you find yourself in an organization that restricts you. Mm-hmm. And there are things that you just can't really, which are not feasible based on the size of your team or the budgets and all that. So it's really take the time to understand the point where those two things intersect. And that is where you can always go back to. And that is what gives you leadership, that innate motivation, that strength to push through when times get tough.
I think that's really fundamental. I think when I was starting out on this journey, I was trying to find the silver bullet or the pearls of wisdom that would be able to give me that. Okay, this is what you've got to do to be a great leader. And I think what I've discovered, and this is I think what you're saying, is no one can tell you how to lead. You've got to understand your values yourself, which is why a lot of people say leadership starts with leading yourself. So you really got to understand what you value, what you want to achieve, how you want to achieve that. And through practice, you find out how you lead. So I don't think people talk about strategies and styles and leadership styles. I don't think there is a formula or a strategy that fits everybody. I think you find your own way based on what you're saying, your principles, your values, why you want to lead, and you find how you want to lead on your own, but through practice and failure and trial again, that sort of thing. I think is that what I'm reading into that right?
There is no one size fits all. Absolutely, there is none. No. And so once you have that anchor and a kind of a framework that helps you put your intuition into a strategy, then you're winning.
Brilliant. Fantastic.
Yeah.
So we're unfortunately we're getting towards the end of this podcast. So before we do, I just want to say a huge thank you for being on the show, imparting all your wisdom and knowledge in terms of leadership and those 6 principles that we talked about, the importance around putting humans at the center of team organization. I think it's hugely important. But the last question I want to ask to wrap the podcast up is, what is it that you think is the most important aspect of leadership?
The human element, literally. The human element, because you can have all the best strategies in the world, you can have the best ideas, but if your team is not buying into that, if you got no people who are buying into that vision, then your leadership is bound to fail. So it is understanding the people within, either in your organization, in your team, whatever that setting is, understanding who they are and what really makes them tick and what motivates them, and playing into their strengths. That is a winning leadership strategy.
That's brilliant. Natalie, thank you ever so much for your time. It's really much appreciated. And I thank you for sharing all your great wisdom.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure sharing this space with you, Michael.
Thank you.